If you want to cross from continental Europe to England, there is one geographic bottleneck that dictates your path. This is the shortest sea crossing between the two landmasses, defined by the White Cliffs of Dover, a massive sheer drop to the dark waters below. Because geography dictates military strategy, this specific choke point has been a target for as long as ships have sailed. Every successive empire that claimed this island was practically forced to fortify this exact patch of chalk and grass. Perched directly on top of these cliffs sits Dover Castle. It was built as the ultimate medieval stronghold, constructed to physically block any invading army right at the threshold. For centuries, the logic of the English defense began and ended right here. While empires and weapons changed, the 20-mile gap to the continent did not, leaving this cliff edge as the island's primary front door. In 1179, King Henry II commissioned this central keep. It is 30 meters wide, 30 meters deep, and armored by solid stone walls up to 6 meters thick. But that brutalist shell was wrapped around a highly luxurious interior. This was a Plantagenet royal palace, built as an unavoidable physical display of wealth to intimidate rival monarchs. At the time, the absolute worst-case scenario for a king was a prolonged physical siege by enemy ships and armies relying on kinetic force. Against that threat, this structure was the perfect technological countermeasure. The logic of medieval defense was simple. Survival meant building upward. You stacked the thickest stone possible to ensure state power was highly visible, impenetrable, and undeniably permanent. 800 years later, the successful splitting of the atom fundamentally broke that centuries-old logic of defense. A 6-meter-thick stone wall is entirely useless against the thermal flash and concussive shockwave of a hydrogen bomb. It would simply vaporize. During the Cold War, the existential threat to Britain was no longer a fleet of wooden ships crossing the English Channel. It was Soviet intercontinental missiles dropping from the stratosphere in a matter of minutes. Faced with an attack from the sky, the British government realized the highest tower was the worst place to be. They had to abandon the surface entirely and dig hundreds of feet into the solid bedrock below. Deep beneath the castle walls, they constructed a highly classified subterranean network. This was equipped to serve as a regional seat of government, designed to manage the country in the aftermath of Armageddon. The castle above had effectively become a beacon for an incoming blast. To survive, the state exchanged its prominent stone walls for hundreds of feet of dark, silent chalk. Down here, life support was claustrophobic and utilitarian. Completely sealed off from the sky, these corridors were fortified by heavy airlocks and thick blast doors. The defense of the realm was no longer tasked to elite armor-clad knights. Instead, it fell to the men and women of the Royal Observer Corps, a covert army of civilian volunteers. Their objective was terrifyingly clinical: intercept data to triangulate the exact location and yield of nuclear strikes, then track the invisible enemy. By plotting fallout plumes against wind currents, they calculated exactly which cities would survive and which would suffocate. Survival in this bunker depended on a different set of weapons: telephone lines, ventilation filters, and the speed at which volunteers could map the movement of toxic clouds. Fortunately, that apocalyptic data never arrived. The Cold War ended without a single nuclear exchange. With the immediate threat of total annihilation lifted, the military finally decommissioned the Dover base in the late 20th century, eventually unsealing these secret tunnels to the public. And when you step back up to the surface, you find those thick medieval walls still standing quietly above the hollowed-out earth. For centuries, people hauled 25-ton stones up this hill to build a towering monument of royal power, only to spend the modern era desperately carving out the bedrock beneath it to hide from the atom. Human technology evolved from iron swords to intercontinental ballistic missiles, but the core geographic bottlenecks of defense and our primal need for physical security remained anchored to this exact same cliff for nearly 1,000 years.